What's very uncertain these days, though, is what is going on in trade, right? For a closer look at the White House tariffs that we saw in solar panels and washing machines that came out on Monday and how this may impact those ongoing Nafta talks in Montreal. I want to bring in Monica Bolle, the senior fellow at the Peterson Institute for International Economics. Monica, first on these tariffs, right, which has really started to make these, which made huge headlines yesterday and continue to do so today. Do you expect this is going to turn into an all-out trade war, particularly with China?
Well, it's certainly a sign of the China crackdown that Trump had spoken of during the campaign and has been, very, very vocal about. So it may be the beginning of that. And if it is, there is the big possibility or the big chance that we might see an expansion of goods and products that will be, that will suffer the same consequences. In other words, have just these high tariffs put on them.
Right, and it's interesting, right, the timing here, Monica, particularly as we are, watching the headlines, out of Davos last year. President Xi Jinping went to Davos and made this, remarkable speech about how dangerous protectionism is. And here he is going back to Davos with the U.S. president slapping these tariffs and threatening more. Are you surprised by the restraint that China has shown so far? And what kind of retaliation might we expect?
Well, you mentioned the timing, and the timing issue is precisely right. And I don't think it is a coincidence by any stretch of the imagination that this is being done now. And on China, yes, China has been restrained, but they have already said that they might go to the WTO against the U.S. And I think that is a very high there is a very high possibility that they might do exactly that. And then we will start to see, the animosity from the two sides and how bad the actions could actually get, and whether or not we get the retaliatory scenario and the sort of trade war scenario that would undoubtedly be bad for the global economy as a whole.
Monica, everything from global equities to just animal spirits, right, has been getting this lift by the story of the synchronized global recovery. And so much of that has been driven by the strong trade data that we've gotten out of these, trade-exposed economies like China, like South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore. How much of this, the potential starting of trade conflicts, do you think is actually likely to substantially kind of derail that good news story when it comes to global growth?
Well, trade conflicts, if they really do escalate, I mean, right now we haven't seen it, but this is the beginning of something, or maybe nothing. We don't know yet. So if it is the beginning of something, and if that something does escalate into a bigger trade war with a lot of retaliation going back and forth between the different countries, and let's remember that the washing machine issue does affect South Korea as well, so it's not just China. So we could start to see, that kind of thing being played out in the global stage. And obviously, if trade starts to be affected in a very big way, yes, that does undermine the rosy scenarios that we've been seeing coming out of IMF projections and World Bank projections and so on.
Well, so far it's been symbolic for China, right? Because we did an analysis of the solar companies operating in China, and virtually none of them have any exposure to the US market. But you're saying that this is a prelude to more, trade tariffs on areas like steel and aluminium, and that's really, I'm imagining, where we're going to see a strong reaction out of Beijing.
That's exactly right. And this is why, China has been somewhat mum about the whole matter. But they have already, sent some signals that they might go to the WTO. And this is precisely because they're expecting action on steel and aluminum, which is most likely coming.
Monica, we were mentioning earlier about Nafta negotiations. Of course, they started, or they're starting. How do you think this is going to, what we've seen in the last 24 hours or so, how is that going to affect negotiations? Does it make it more likely the U.S. is going to pull out of Nafta?
Not necessarily. And I think from the point of view of Mexico and Canada, the fact that the administration has turned its attention to China and to these issues in the middle of the Nafta negotiations, which are currently, the sixth round is currently occurring in Montreal, maybe this is actually a good thing because it turns the attention away from Mexico, Canada, and NAFTA and towards China. So there's that kind of silver lining. I don't know if it's a silver lining, but at least a temporary reprieve from, just bashing NAFTA that we've seen quite a bit of. On the other hand, the mere fact of the tariffs and the measures that were taken yesterday is just a sign of things that Mexico and Canada are well aware of. In other words, these two countries, which are sitting down and have been negotiating with the Trump administration for months. As I said, we're into the 6th round now, so it's been 6 months. They're well aware of the fact that it's all about trade deficits and it's all about reducing the U.S. trade deficit. So it's no surprise to them that something like that would come up, just as it hasn't been much of a surprise to them that the U.S. administration has insisted on certain demands that they're not ready to meet. So, we will have to see how the Montreal round plays out. For the next several days, these are basically technical negotiations because obviously the ministers are not in Montreal. They will likely be there early next week, and that's when we'll have some signal of where these negotiations are actually going to go. Whether the contentious issues are going to be resolved in some way, whether they're not going to be resolved, whether they're going to be pushed to the side, and whether or not we're going to have a 7th round come February.
Monica, we've seen in the last couple of days the remaining TPP members getting ready to sign this final deal in March. Is there any hope that the US might return to the TPP?
Not at this time. And I think again, it's very symbolic that, about a year from when the U.S. pulled out of TPP, these countries have just announced, the TPP 11 countries, or I should say the CPTPP as it's currently called. These 11 countries have agreed to sign a deal on March 8th in Chile. They're just seeing what's going on with the U.S. and with the U.S. pulling out of the global trading, system and just becoming very, very protectionist. They're seeing a space to fill, and they're filling that space. And they're also trying to protect themselves against any kind of trade backlash that these actions that the U.S. is taking might lead to.